8 spine-chilling sugar daddy tales. Discover the sinister price of haunted wealth revealed. Claire thought she'd struck gold when Richard reappeared in her life. It was like winning the lottery, or so she thought. Life in the suburbs of Chicago was a grind. Bills piled high on the kitchen table, and the weight of a mortgage sat heavily on her chest. Mia, her rebellious teenage daughter, seemed determined to make things harder. But suddenly, with Richard back, it felt like the clouds were parting, and a golden opportunity was shining through. He promised her a glamorous lifestyle, and Claire clung to that promise. But the excitement of extravagant dinners and beautiful clothes faded swiftly, replaced by a chill that crawled across the back of her neck. That it started innocently enough. The flickering lights in the hallway were nothing at first, just an old house, Claire thought, dismissing them with a laugh. But as she enjoyed the spoils of her relationship with Richard, the laughter faded to whispers. Shadows danced on the walls, and Claire found herself glancing over her shoulder, convinced she could feel a pair of eyes watching her. It was unsettling, like an icy hand gripping her heart. Even simple tasks, grocery shopping, cooking dinner, helping Mia with her homework, became shrouded in unease. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Claire's heart raced as she found herself staying up late, scrolling through Richard's past. She stumbled upon strange subreddits discussing haunted wealth and cursed fortunes. Guests in the community recounted tales of families whose fortunes led to disaster, houses overrun with shadows, and dark figures lurking just out of sight. As Claire scrolled through each anecdote, she began to sense a growing presence in her own home, an unease that twisted her stomach into knots. Mia's behavior shifted, too. She claimed to see a dark figure lurking in the garden, her voice shaking with fear that Claire brushed off as teenage melodrama. Yet, even Mia's wild stories were laced with a truth Claire could no longer ignore. One night, after yet another argument over Claire's new lavish lifestyle, Mia stormed out with friends, leaving behind an unsettling silence that hung heavy in the air. Hours ticked by, and panic seeped into Claire's bones when she realized Mia hadn't returned. The house grew colder. Whispers echoed across the walls, voices barely audible but full of dread. With every past minute, Claire's heart beat faster, pounding relentlessly as she reached for her phone. It buzzed with a message, a cryptic warning about the life she had chosen, urging her to look deeper, to recognize the price of her newfound wealth. When Mia's phone lit up with a final message, "Mom, help me." They know Claire felt ice wash over her. Had she gone too far in this chase for happiness? With dread pooling in her stomach, she knew she had to confront Richard. Secrets lay buried in their perfect suburb, and she was determined to unearth the dark truth before it was too late. The shadows grew longer, the air thicker, and Claire sensed she was just on the cusp of uncovering something that could shatter everything. Claire stood frozen in the kitchen, her breath hitching as the last message from Mia echoed in her mind. The walls closed in around her, pressing like a vice. She glanced toward the door leading into the dimly lit hallway, where the flickering lights cast ominous shadows. Were those shadows truly moving, or was it just her imagination? She wiped her clammy hands on her jeans, adrenaline coursing through her veins. With a shaky breath, Claire gripped her phone tighter and sent a message to Mia. "Where are you? I'm worried." But deep down, she feared it wouldn't be enough. The plink of the radiators, the creak of the floorboards, and the low hum of the fridge became orchestrated reminders of her growing dread. Everything felt wrong. Fueled by panic, she left the kitchen and crept into the living room, her heart beating hard against her ribs. Each step forward felt like wading through molasses. She had to find Richard. He knew things, secrets woven into the fabric of their relationship. Yet butterflies danced in her stomach, a foreboding reminder that Richard was not who he seemed. Claire dialed Richard's number, the sound of the ringing echoing unnaturally loud in her ears. What if he didn't answer? What if she never saw Mia again? Just as she was preparing to leave a frantic voicemail, Richard's voice broke through. Claire? What's wrong? Mia. She's not home, Claire blurted, fighting the tremor in her voice. I think something's wrong. I need you to help me find her. There was a pause, heavy and suffocating. Stay calm. Where did she go? She just left. She was upset. I don't know where she is. Please, you have to come over. Desperation laced her words. All right, I'll be there soon. Lock the doors, Claire. Don't let anyone in. The line went dead, and Claire felt a tingle of unease scuttle down her spine. Lock the doors? Why did that sound so ominous? She glanced towards the front door, the heavy wood looking more like a barrier against the unknown than a mere entrance. Taking a deep breath, she turned the deadbolt, the sound echoing like a countdown in her mind. Then, she moved throughout the house, closing every window, drawing every curtain. But deep inside, she knew that keeping things out might not be enough. Something was already inside. As she made her way back to the living room, she heard a soft rustling from the garden outside. Goosebumps prickled her skin, the shadows shifting and sighing as if something inhuman was beckoning her. Mia? Silence swallowed her words. Fear swept over her like a cold wave, and her instincts screamed to turn away. Instead, she drifted closer to the glass door, peering out into the black abyss beyond her yard. Suddenly, a figure stepped forth from the darkness. A tall silhouette moving unnaturally. Claire's breath caught in her throat. It was too shadow-like, too distorted to be Mia. Claire, the voice whispered, melodic yet tainted with malice. Claire staggered back, heart pounding like a war drum. A clear image shot through her mind. Mia's message. They know. Who exactly knew? Rushing back to the front door, she grabbed her keys, her fingers trembling as she struggled to find the right one. It almost felt like time had stopped, the air thickening with dread. Just as she took another step, her phone buzzed again, vibrating furiously against the table. She blinked at the screen. It was a video from Mia. Claire played it immediately. The darkness flickered to life. Mia's face appeared, but her eyes were wide with terror. Mom, you need to listen. Richard is not. The video abruptly cut off, plunging Claire into silence. What was Richard hiding? Was he part of the terror haunting their lives? Claire felt bile rise in her throat as the figure outside near the glass door began to move closer. Fear overwhelmed her, and she realized she had a choice to make. Should she trust the man who had awakened her dreams or confront the nightmare that was creeping closer? The figure shifted again. Claire hesitated, taking a step towards the door. The choice loomed, heavier than her worst fears. Would she unlock a door to liberation or to an even darker fate? Claire's heart raced as shadows danced on the other side of the glass door. The voice, that chilling whisper, wrapped around her like icy fingers. What could be lurking just out of view? The figure leaned closer, and she could almost make out a face emerging from the darkness. A face too familiar yet utterly foreign. Mia? Is that you? Claire's voice wavered, a desperate plea against the chaos in her racing mind. But the figure only smiled, a slow, haunting curl of its lips, too wide, too sharp. It's not Mia you should worry about. Panic surged as she stumbled backward, her breath coming in short gasps. The house felt smaller, suffocating. Gritting her teeth, Claire willed herself to focus. Richard would be here soon. She had to hold on. The shadows flickered again, stretching as the figure took a step forward. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but where could she go? She was trapped in this house, alone and isolated, surrounded by the dark. Suddenly, a loud bang resonated from upstairs, shattering the silence like a glass breaking on concrete. Rich, she shouted instinctively, her heart racing at the thought of him being here. But only silence answered. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to push aside her dread. Stay calm, Claire. You can't lose it now. With shaky hands, she grabbed her phone and sent another message to Mia, praying she would somehow receive it. Help! Where are you? The figure outside tilted its head, a predatory move. "You shouldn't want her to come back," it murmured, every word dripping with an insidious sweetness. Claire turned her back on the door, urgency surging through her limbs. She needed a plan. What if Richard was right about the danger? What if letting anyone in would put them both at risk? As she made her way toward the stairs, the old wooden steps creaked ominously beneath her weight. Every step was a reminder that each creak might lure the impending horror right behind her. The voices, the shadows, it felt like the house was alive, taunting her, whispering secrets she wasn't meant to hear. But then another thought struck her. What if Mia was in danger because of Richard? He had been distant lately, secrets hidden behind his charming smile. The thought crept like ice in her veins. Every moment spent pondering made her feel like a suffocating weight was crushing her chest. With a surge of determination, she reached the top of the stairs and moved toward the bedroom. Richard had a drawer full of notebooks. He scribbled revised thoughts and ideas for his work. Maybe there was something in there, something he hadn't shared with her about Mia or whatever darkness was pursuing them. But first, she had to brace herself for what awaited her there. As she reached the bedroom door, Claire paused, clutching the doorknob. It was now or never. She had to know the truth. But before she could turn it, a chilling voice called from below, the voice that had drawn her in so effortlessly. "Claire, let me in. I can help you." It wasn't Richard. Cold dread wrapped around her, knotting in her stomach. She glanced back toward the stairs, heart thumping. Should she risk opening the door? In a world where the familiar turned monstrous, who could she trust? The darkness seemed to pulse around her, alive and waiting, whispering promises draped in deceit. With a grim resolve, Claire took a deep breath and prepared to confront the abyss behind the door, wondering how she could possibly escape the web of lies woven around her. What truth awaited her on the other side, and how far would she go to uncover it? Claire's fingers trembled on the doorknob. The chill in the air tightened around her, reminding her of the figure lurking outside. "I can help you." The words echoed in her mind, taunting her with shades of familiarity and dread. She steeled herself and turned the knob, every creak of the door amplifying the silence of the house. Light from the hallway poured into the darkened room, illuminating a space that felt strangely intimate, yet unsettling. Richard's side was untouched, books stacked precariously, clothes draped carelessly, his usual mess. But it was the drawer that pulled her in, a siren's call whispering secrets of its own. With a deep breath, Claire moved toward the desk. Her hands shook as she pulled open the drawer, the wood groaning in protest. Inside were notebooks filled with tight, frenzied scrawls, sketches of her and Mia intertwined with cryptic symbols. A wave of nausea washed over her. Was this a glimpse into Richard's mind, or something darker? She rifled through the pages, flipping past pages filled with hurried notes, until she stumbled over a single sheet. The writing was different, hasty yet clear. "They're watching. She has to go. It's the only way." Her heart dropped. Who was watching? What did he mean by "she has to go"? With trembling hands, Claire reached for another book, the leather cover cold against her skin. The title glared back at her, "The Haunting Truth." Just as she opened it, the door creaked behind her. She froze. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was entering the bedroom. "Claire?" The voice was soft, honeyed, but there was a malice hiding beneath. "Who's there?" She glanced over her shoulder, but the shadows offered no comfort. "Don't be scared. You've always been safe here." It was the figure again. Claire's pulse quickened, the heartbeat thumping loudly in her ears. Panic surged up her throat. She knew that voice. Mia had said similar things during late-night talks, times when they shared secrets and fears. But this wasn't Mia. What had happened to her friend? Claire turned back to the drawer, her eye catching an unfinished sketch of a woman with hollow eyes set between pages full of darkness. "Open the window, Claire. Let me in. You need me." The tone was pleading, but Claire felt a chill creep up her spine. Everything inside her warned her against it. A pit of dread settled in her stomach as she tried to reason with herself. "It's not real. It's a trick. She has gone. This is something else." The door creaked further as the figure stepped inside, the light catching glimpses of its horror. A familiar face twisted into a grotesque grin, eyes hollow and lifeless, as if the very essence of Mia had been devoured. "You don't want to know the truth, Claire. Just let me help you," it crooned, stepping closer, each word dripping with malice. "Get away from me," Claire shouted, backing up until her back hit the cold wall. The comforting walls of her home felt like a prison now, constricting and dangerous. Why not let it all unfold? "Claire, don't you want to see what he has been hiding?" The figure cocked its head, like a predator savoring its prey. Claire felt her throat tighten. Richard's notebook, that revelation, the warning. She couldn't wallow in paralysis. With a burst of adrenaline, she lunged for the door, intent on escaping whatever this was. But as she flung it open, the darkness spilled inside, and the last remnants of safety dissipated. A shadow locked eyes with hers, the purest terror reflected back. She could feel its hunger, its desire to consume. "Join us, Claire. You'll be free," it whispered, fingers stretching out toward her. Her breath caught. She couldn't trust it. Yet there was something alluring about the invitation, images of safety, familiarity twirling in her mind as she stumbled backward. Her world narrowed, the shadows pressing in, both soothing and deadly. Claire had to escape, but escape to where? Her legs felt like lead, her resolve faltering amidst a swirl of confusion. And in that moment of freeze-frame terror, as the darkness loomed ever closer, she heard a whisper far off, shattering the tension. "I'm back." Questions clawed at her mind. Could Mia be alive? Or was this just another trick? The figure's grin widened. It was time to make her choice. With hearts racing, how far would Claire go to protect herself from the darkness that lurked both outside and within? Claire's chest felt tight, breath quickening as the darkness closed in. The shadows churned like a living thing, pulsating with her fear. "I'm not letting you in," she screamed, conviction trailing her words like a whisper, drowning under the weight of panic. But the figure laughed softly, a sound that clawed at her gut. "You think you can escape? The darkness is already inside you." Every moment slipped like grains of sand through her fingers, immediate and fleeting. Claire could feel her heart pounding a frantic tattoo in her ears, drowning out reason, drowning out the warnings etched in Richard's torn notes. She turned, adrenaline surging, ready to bolt past the figure, but the room seemed to shift and stretch, elongating back into the familiar but now nightmarish space. The air was thick and viscous. It clung to her skin as she squeezed through the threshold. It felt like moving through water, the door frame barely yielding as the darkness twisted and spiraled around her ankles. Claire, the familiar voice, slithered behind her, seducing her with tulip sweetness. "Don't run. Let us talk." But she wasn't interested in conversation. Each step away from the figure felt like she was tearing away from the last vestige of safety. The living room lay ahead, dimly lit by the flickering streetlights slicing through the window like a knife. Shadows darted and flickered against the walls, images of despair dancing in the dark corners. "Claire." The voice grew sharper, more insistent. "We have unfinished business." She stumbled into the living room, grabbing the nearest object, Richard's old baseball bat, her hands clammy against the smooth wood. It felt inadequate against the terror that hovered just behind her, a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Sweat trickled down her spine as she swung the bat in front of her, her breath coming in short gasps. "Get away from me. Come on, Claire. You have questions. What do you want to know?" The shadows behind her coiled tighter, teasing her with tantalizing secrets. She had to ask. It clawed at her. What did he do to you?" In an instant, the figure morphed, twisting into a grotesque caricature of Mia. Its laugh resonated, guttural and cruel. "Show me your fears, and I'll set you free." The room darkened further, the very walls bending in, suffocating her choices like a noose. The bat felt heavy in her grip, the last lifeline to sanity. "You're not Mia, you're not her. But I am. I'm all that's left of her." The voice echoed, comforting yet furious, like a broken mirror reflecting a hideous truth. "You can't run forever, Claire. You're where you belong." That eerie promise settled in her heart like an omen. It was impossible. It was madness. She turned away from the figure, scrabbling for the door. With a burst of primal fear, she ripped it open, the cool night air flooding around her. But the darkness clawed at her limbs, wrapping tightly, tugging her back into its embrace. Just as she lunged into the hallway, a hand shot out, wrapping around her arm like iron. She gasped, dropping the bat as her other hand grasped at her attacker. But there was nothing to grab a void where flesh should have been. "Don't fight it, Claire." The echoing voice caressed her ear. "Let me show you the truth of it all." Through the haze of fear, Claire felt raw fragments of memories. A flick of laughter, warm embraces, fleeting moments of tenderness ruptured by screams, fractured by loss. The darkness pulsed within her like a heartbeat, a violent reminder of against the grain reality she desperately sought to escape. Squeezing her eyes shut, she thought of Richard, of their moments, of the warnings scrawled in his notebooks. "I will not become a part of you," she whispered, forcing the words from between clenched teeth. Too late. The shadows hissed, and the grip tightened. "You're already one of us. Embrace it." The prose of despair sharpened into clarity as she opened her eyes to the spread of looming shadows yearning for her surrender. In the encompassing chaos, she felt the pull of something greater. A voice inside her broke. Through the cycle, "Fight back, Claire. For us." An electric rush surged through her, igniting a furious resolve. With every ounce of strength, she broke free, pushing against the weight of darkness as she lurched into the night, the screams trailing behind. But from the depths, the shadows lingered, whispering promises of torment mixed with eerily tender echoes of a past lost. Heart racing, pulse quickening, Claire ran into the unknown, prepared to unravel the sinister truth still waiting for her beyond the darkness. What horrors awaited her outside? Would they pull her back or lead her to a salvation she couldn't fathom? With uncertainty swelling into dread, Claire plunged into the cold night air, knowing the figure was still hunting her. Without a place to hide, the fight was only beginning. The street was alive with echoes, the muffled sounds of a world that felt impossibly distant. Claire sprinted, the cold air biting at her lungs, filling her head with a fog of desperation. Her feet pounded against the pavement in a wild rhythm, every step a fight against the weight of dread that clung to her like a shroud. Her heart thudded in her chest, pulsing with the memory of the figure's mocking voice. "Remember, Claire, I'm always with you." She turned a corner sharply, gasping as she tripped over uneven pavement, tumbling to her knees. The rush of pain shot through her as she pushed herself back up, wiping the dirt from her hands and glancing behind her. Nothing, just darkness. The familiar streets twisted in the shadows of the night, and she felt lost, a wanderer in a haunted landscape. Every flickering streetlight seemed to cast sinister shapes, memories of the figure lurking just beyond her vision. Fresh panic gripped her as the shadows seemed to stretch, reaching out with tendrils of darkness that tore at her sanity. "Keep moving," she whispered to herself, a mantras against the dread clawing at her mind. "Don't look back." She remembered Richard's notes, the warnings he had scribbled, the way he had tried to explain the darkness that consumed Mia. She wished she had listened harder, wished she had pushed him to share more. The wind howled, carrying with it chilling laughter that echoed her own fears. She shook her head, pushing on, hoping to find a safe haven. But the world around her felt wrong, grotesque shadows dancing in her peripheral vision. Each alley looked darker than the last. Every turn felt wrong, as if reality itself was stitching a web to ensnare her. Claire finally spotted a diner, its neon sign flickering like it was trying to stave off the night. She dashed toward it, praying for people, for safety. As she reached for the door, a chill crept up her spine. It might be a trap, a voice whispered in her mind, a reminder of the myriad horrors lurking just beneath the surface. She hesitated, balancing the decision between safety and uncertainty. Then she heard it, a sigh, almost a breath. Familiar. "Mia?" The name slipped out before she could stop herself. A laugh echoed back, twisted with mockery. "You think you can hide here? They can smell your fear, Claire." The realization struck like a lightning bolt. Light wouldn't save her. It would only expose her. Panic surged, and she turned away from the door, sprinting down the side of the diner. The shadows seemed to pull away, then rush in at her heels, eager and hungry. The alley was a tight fit, the concrete walls closing in, threatening to crush her against the very darkness she ran from. Her throat tightened. She could hear whispers now, an insidious murmur that curled around her thoughts. "Return to us, you can't escape." She squeezed her eyes shut, digging her nails into her palms, desperation clamping down around her like a vice. "I want tea. I refuse to be yours," she screamed, throwing her hands out in front of her, as if she could push back the very shadows that sought to consume her. But the laughter only deepened, wrapping around her like a dark cloak. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, she stumbled into an open space, gasping at what she found at a playground, oddly lit, with swings swaying on their own, casting shadows of children that danced beneath the moonlight. But no children were there. Only silence reigned. Her heart pounded erratically as she stood frozen, suddenly surrounded by ghostly laughter. "What have you brought back, Claire?" The shadows twisted and swirled, the darkness alive, becoming malleable, conjuring nightmares she hadn't even begun to imagine. "Run, Claire." A voice rang out strong, familiar. Richard. The figure loomed before her, a dark silhouette in the center of the playground. It was not just any figure. It was Richard, and within his face, she saw unfathomable pain etched deep. "Is it really you?" she gasped, dread mingling with hope. But the shadows laughed again, echoing the hollow promises of acceptance and then betrayal. "Run or join us," he warned, his voice strained, blending into the chilling ambience that surrounded her. The air thickened with despair, her instincts screaming that she was running out of time. The darkness was closing in again, tasting her anxiety with every passing heartbeat. But was Richard really there, or was this another trick of the shadows? With uncertainty flooding her, Claire faced the all-consuming void once more. Fight or flight, either way, the darkness would demand its price. As she prepared to dart back to the street, a new dread settled in. What if there were nowhere left to run? Would she face the truth of the shadows or risk everything to free Richard from their grasp? "Make your choice, Claire," the shadows hissed, and she felt the ground shift beneath her. What lay ahead was murky, filled with unchained terror, and the clock was ticking. Would she uncover the truth or succumb to the nightmarish pull? The ground trembled underfoot, shifting like a living thing. Claire stood rooted, fighting the urge to flee but feeling the weight of Richard's presence pulling her in. Could she trust him? Was he truly her ally or another lure of the darkness that had ensnared Mia? "Claire, listen to me." Richard's voice sliced through the chaos, but his form flickered, growing less substantial. Panic swelled within her, and the laughter from the shadows intensified, swirling around them like a hurricane of malice, taunting her. "Join us, Claire. You can't escape." The mocking chorus resonated, shaking the very air around her. Claire clasped her hands over her ears, but she could still feel the sinister undertone creeping into her thoughts, a bed of whispers searching for cracks in her resolve. Everything inside her screamed to run. Every instinct told her that standing still was the ultimate act of surrender. "Run." Richard's voice cut through the gloom again, sharper this time, filling her with urgency. She turned suddenly, her feet moving before her mind could process the choices. The swings creaked ominously as she sprinted back towards the alley, the shadows writhing in delight, tasting her fear like a fine wine. Each derisive laugh pushed her faster, fueling her adrenaline. The streetlights became her waypoints, flickering dangerously like distant stars. She poured every ounce of energy into each stride, flinging herself forward into the darkness, where the alley opened into a deserted road. The air was thick, pressing in around her, suffocating. As she stumbled through an intersection, her heart pounding, Claire's breath hitched. Off in the distance, she caught sight of a figure crossing the street. It was another silhouette draped in darkness, and before she could call out, it turned, eyes glowing with a violent crimson that pierced the night. "Get back!" she shouted, words tumbling from her lips as instinct kicked in. How many more were there? Was this another trick? But the figure only smiled, a wicked grin splitting its face, stretching impossibly wide. "Still running, Claire? You can't escape your fate. We're everywhere just like your fear. We will find you." She nearly stumbled, barely keeping her feet as she pushed through another alley, desperate for a sanctuary. No rest, no safety. As Claire rushed forward, she thought of Richard, of the last desperate warning she'd heard. Why hadn't she navigated towards the light, towards the truth he so desperately wanted her to hear? Would she lose him forever to the shadows, or would she have a chance to confront the darkness together? Suddenly, she felt a sharp jolt. A hand wrapped around her wrist, pulling her into the cool embrace of another alleyway. "Keep up," a voice hissed, tugging her deeper into the shadows. She recognized it instantly. David, one of Richard's friends. But his face was pale, haunted, eyes filled with fear and urgency. "What are you doing here?" she gasped. "Trying to save you." He returned, eyes flitting nervously back as if expecting the figure to re-emerge from the dark. "Richard, I have to help him." He shot her a panicked look, one that told her they had to keep moving. "There's no time. They'll sense your hesitation. We need to find the others." "Others?" Panic bled into her voice. "Are they safe?" "No one is safe if you stay here. The shadows want you, Claire. We need to regroup. They want to drag you down and drain you. There's a price for everyone." "What about Richard?" she pressed, heart racing harder. David's expression hardened, a bead of sweat running down his brow. "There's no time to explain. We need every ounce of strength, yours, mine, and everyone else's. If we don't stand together, we won't stand at all. Move!" The alley twisted, shadows beckoning at her feet, eager to snatch her from the world above. With a last glance towards the fading light of the playground, Claire knew she had to make a choice. Abandon hope for Richard or risk everything to save him from the darkness pulling at their very souls. "What's the price they want?" she demanded as they plunged deeper into the alley, the world around her closing in. David paused, his breath hitching. "The price has always been your heart, but it's up to you to decide what that means." The shadows loomed closer, the air vibrating with dark energy. "Choose wisely." Claire, the echoes of laughter danced behind her as despair crept into her heart. Could she save Richard and herself before it was too late? Claire's breath came in ragged gasps as she followed David, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Shadows chased them, swirling around like hungry wolves, every gust of wind whispering threats that curled cold fingers around her mind. In the darkness, every second felt like an eternity, every alleyway a potential trap. "Where do we go?" she croaked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the terror that gnawed at her. "Trust me," David said tersely, his eyes darting left and right. "There's an old warehouse up ahead where the others are hiding. It's our best shot." Images of Richard flickered through her mind, hazy and desperate. She couldn't abandon him. Yet the fear of what lurked behind them, clinging to their shadows like a hungry predator, made every step heavy with dread. As they rounded a corner, the heavy wooden doors of the warehouse loomed before them, shrouded in darkness. It looked abandoned, but something about it felt alive, a pulse thrumming beneath the surface. Claire hesitated at the entrance, the air thickening as the shadows whispered like a poison in her ear. "Quick!" David urged, grabbing her arm and pulling her inside. The warehouse reeked of rot and neglect. Dim light filtered through grime-encrusted windows, casting eerie shapes across the floor, liquid shadows creeping over cracked concrete. David led Claire deeper inside, navigating through the debris of forgotten machinery. The air was stifling, weighed down by a sense of impending doom. "Where is everyone?" Claire whispered, her unease palpable. The space felt empty, too quiet, and the echoes of their footsteps seemed too loud in the vast expanse. "Over here," David hissed as he hurried toward a faint light coming from the rear of the warehouse. As they approached, silhouettes materialized, eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. Claire. A familiar voice called from within the circle of light. Mia. Claire shouted, rushing toward her friend who looked disheveled and haunted her presence, a flickering flame against the encroaching darkness. Mia, are you okay? Claire demanded, gripping her shoulders, searching for reassurance. I think so. Mia's voice trembled. But they're hunting us. They know we're here. David glanced back toward the entrance, brow furrowed. We need to move. They're coming. What do you mean, they're coming? Mia's eyes widened, and Claire felt the dread deepen as she noticed the growing anxiety written on everyone's faces. We're not safe yet. When Claire got away, it drew their attention. If we don't act now, David's voice trailed off. The grim reality hanging in the air. A guttural roar echoed outside, and the ground shook again, a harbinger of chaos. Claire's heart raced. What was that? Before anyone could respond, the warehouse doors shuddered violently, splintering under the strain of unseen forces. A crack sliced through the darkness as the doors flew open, and there stood the figure from before, cloaked in shadows, eyes blazing with fervor as they searched the room. Your heart belongs to us, Claire, the figure called, its voice an eerie melodic echo that resonated with dread. You can't hide from your true nature. You will join us. Panic erupted in the group. Shadows leered from every corner, hungry for the warmth of flesh and the essence of life. Claire felt the walls closing in, suffocating her resolve. We can't let them take you, Mia exclaimed, her voice rising above the dread. But the darkness thrummed with sinister energy, driving its talons closer. No, we can't give in, David shouted, pushing back against the urge to flee. But what if fleeing was their only hope? The thought surged within Claire. Was it too late? The shadows leaped, twisting around her. Choose, the figure commanded, its eyes glowing brighter, illuminating the faces around her. Your friends or your heart? What will you sacrifice? Time slowed, her pulse quickened, and terror gripped her throat. One choice could lead to salvation, the other to damnation. Could they find a way out? Or was this her last stand? In this moment of agonizing uncertainty, Claire faced the darkness. She had to make a decision, one that would seal their fate. But as she opened her mouth to speak, the rippling shadows surged forth, engulfing the warehouse, and Claire realized they might all be consumed by the very darkness they feared. Would they escape, or was this the dawn of their end? The shadowed figure smiled, a grimace of triumph painted across its face, and the only thing Claire could hear was the deafening echo of her own fear. Claire's heart raced as the shadows converged upon her, wrapping around her limbs like icy tendrils. The air thickened with a sickening scent, a rotting mixture of despair and death. She could hear the whispers now, indecipherable yet hauntingly familiar, echoing her deepest fears. Instinct screamed for her to run, but David's grasp tightened around her wrist, anchoring her to the present. Stick together. David's voice cut through the rising panic. He backed toward the flickering light, a desperate attempt to shield them from the encroaching dark. Mia. Claire turned, eyes pleading. What do we do? Mia's face twisted in anguish. We can't let it take you, Claire. We'll fight for you. The fear in Mia's eyes transformed into a fierce determination that gave Claire a glimmer of hope. Suddenly, a cacophony of sounds erupted outside the warehouse. Dull thuds mixed with frantic shouts, a stampede of shadowy figures drawn by their desperation. Clara's stomach dropped. They weren't just hunting her, they were coming for all of them. David, we need a plan, Claire urged. He shook his head, wide-eyed. If we don't barricade the doors, we won't have time to escape. Mia, grab that piece of scrap metal. The urgency ignited their movements. Mia darted toward a rusted sheet, struggling against its weight. David moved quickly to the heavy wooden structure, attempting to push it against the doors. Claire felt the shadows inching closer, a suffocating blanket clawing at her sanity. They pressed against the edges of her vision, each second magnifying their terror. Faster, David hissed. Mia strained, her hands slick with sweat as she struggled to lift the metal. Claire forced herself to stay calm, but the throbbing in her chest betrayed her. Just as they shoved the door closed with a deafening bang, the shadowed figure stepped inside, its presence colder and darker than the space around. "You think you can hide from the inevitable?" it whispered, voice crackling like distant thunder. The shadows writhed like living things, dancing around it, eager for the scent of fear that filled the air. The darkness surged, the temperature plunging dramatically. "Your choice will come soon enough, Claire," it said, a smirk curving its lips, eyes aglow with malevolence. "Stay back," David shouted, throwing himself in front of Claire. The shadows began creeping closer, and the group found themselves gradually surrounded, the pressure mounting as they pressed together for support. "Look," Mia pointed, her voice edged with hysteria. "That window. It's our only chance." David's gaze flicked to the grime-ridden glass above them, reflecting fleeting silhouettes of anguish. "If we can break it, maybe." Without waiting for further instructions, Mia grabbed a wooden beam, raising it over her head. On three, Claire's limbs felt rubbery, jello-like as she tried to steel herself, panic clawing at her throat. She locked eyes with David, who nodded, determination flickering like a flame fighting against the wind. 1, 2, 3. Mia swung the beam against the window. It shattered with a shriek, razor shards raining down like sparkling stars in the dim light. "Go, now," David yelled, pushing Claire toward the jagged void. But as they moved, the darkness surged forward, creating a wall of shadow, relentless and suffocating. Claire felt it brush against her skin, fingers of ice seeking out her very essence. "Claire," David shouted, urging her on, but she hesitated, terror paralyzing her. "No," Mia screamed, reaching for Claire's hand, desperate to pull her through. But Claire felt the cold grip of shadows tightening. "Go," Claire shouted, but it slipped out barely more than a whisper. The others surged through the opening, and she was left alone, ensnared between the desperate pleas of her friends and the chilling call of the darkness. "Sacrifice," the figure hissed, its voice wrapping around her like a serpent. "You can join us willingly or be consumed." As the shadows closed in tighter, Claire's mind raced. She could choose to fight or she could embrace the terror. In this heart-stopping moment, she faced what she feared most, not the danger outside, but the darkness within herself. Would she give in or strike out? Fate hung in the balance as the figures pressed close, their presence a mocking reminder of her unwanted choice. Desperation consumed her as she contemplated what lay ahead, and then something inside her flickered, a defiant spark. She had to make a choice, but as she prepared to react, the whispers grew louder, and her vision blurred. The enveloping darkness began to weave its way into her mind, and she realized that perhaps she was never truly alone in her fears. What was this darkness? And did it have a plan for her that went far beyond mere consumption? The answer loomed just out of reach, as the shadows danced ever closer. Claire's chest tightened, her breath coming in rapid bursts as the shadows closed in around her. Every whisper wrapped around her thoughts, a cacophony blending her fears and insecurities into one dark mass. "I have to choose," she thought, the flickering light of hope waning as the darkness loomed closer. They mocked her, taunting her with promises of safety laced with malevolence. "Join us," Claire the figure crooned, its deep voice echoing like a funeral dirge that pierced through the very marrow of her bones. "You'll never escape. It's in you already." "No," Claire shouted, the word escaping from her lips like a desperate prayer. Inside her, a cascade of emotions churned: the love for her daughter, the fear of losing Richard, the relentless dread creeping through her veins. Suddenly, Mia's fierce voice broke through the chaos. "You're stronger than this. Remember how you fought for me when I was lost?" It ignited something within Claire. If Mia could fight through her own darkness not only for herself, but for Claire, then she could fight for them both. As the shadows twisted and reached for her, Claire recalled those fleeting moments of love and laughter with Mia, their late-night talks, baking cookies that burnt but still felt like magic. And Richard, his warm smile when they connected, even if the last few threads of that connection were fraying. Claire surged forward, grounding herself in the love she carried deep within, a strength that the shadows could not dismantle. "Step back," David yelled, positioning himself in front of Claire. "We won't let you take her." He held up the splintered piece of wood like a weapon against the impending darkness. In that moment, Claire felt a fire ignite inside her. She reached for the very essence of hope, a flicker of defiance, and threw it at the shadowed figure. "I won't be your puppet," she cried. "You don't own me. You don't own Mia or David." The shadows recoiled, as if pierced by her determination. For a heartbeat, everything stilled, the whispers drowning in a sudden silence that roared with potential. The realization washed over her. The darkness thrived on her fear, just as much as her love could fuel her fight. "I reject you," she shouted with unwavering conviction, eyes blazing. "You have no claim over my heart." In that moment, a blinding light erupted from within, a luminescent force cascading outwards, rippling like waves rebuffing the shadows. Against the walls of despair, Claire surged forth, pushing back against the looming darkness that promised destruction. She felt an answer rise inside her, a warmth radiating that drowned out all the cold fear that had once shackled her. "I choose love. I choose to live." With that declaration, the shadows began to dissipate, screams of fury intermingling with disbelief. Claire turned toward David and Mia, feeling their hands envelop hers, anchoring her to this newfound power, their essences blending together like fire igniting against the night. But then the figure howled in anger, its form twisting wildly as it clawed at the fading shadows. "You'll regret this," it bellowed, retreating into the depths of the dark. "Your heart will always belong to us." The darkness may have scattered, but its whispers would linger, both taunting and pleading. As the final remnants of shadows evaporated, Claire felt the weight lift, freeing her lungs from the heavy grasp of terror. She turned, breathless, eyes catching on Mia's ghostly expression of awe and fear. "It worked," Mia gasped, pulse quickening. They had survived. Together, David looked between them, a glimmer of relief breaking across his strained features. "We need to leave this place for good," he urged, voice laced with urgency. They dashed toward the cracked exit, aware that shadows lingered but burdened by the knowledge that they were stronger together. As they stepped out into the cool night air, the stars twinkled overhead, a reminder of resilience, hope, and the power of love to shine even in the darkest of times. And in the stillness that followed, they turned back to one another, hearts firmer than ever. They had faced the darkness and emerged triumphant, resolute in their vow to keep fighting for each other, for the love they hadn't lost, and for the truth of their own hearts. "Let's get home," Claire whispered softly, her voice steady, and as they walked away from the shadows of night, the whispers faded into the distance, leaving nothing but promise and the unwavering bond of family. This is the moment you need to grab hold of. Don't wait even one more second to show your support. If you want to hear more thrilling tales like this, subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss out. Smash that like button now to help feed the algorithm. Trust me, it makes all the difference. Flood the comments section with your thoughts on this story, your reactions, and what you think might happen next. And please, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this conclusion. You need to be part of this growing community. Only true fans understand the importance of these actions.